This is Emma Laughlin, Communications Intern with Farm Credit Financial Partners, and 2020 marks our 25th year anniversary. A quarter of a century ago, Farm Credit Financial Partners, or as many fondly refer to us as FPI, opened for business in Agawam, Massachusetts. We began with 32 employees and the ambitious goal of innovating technology services for farm credit. Today, we have grown to over 250 employees across the country, serving 6 Agricultural Credit Association partners. To help us commemorate our 25-year history, we have with us Bill Lipinski, CEO. Bill, please introduce yourself and explain what your current role is here at FPI.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Thanks for having me here today to kind of talk about FPI from a historical perspective. A little history on myself. I've been with the farm credit system for over 40 years. My most recent assignment was the Chief Executive Officer of Farm Credit East, one of the owners of FPI, where I served as the CEO for 25 years, retiring at the end of 2019. At the beginning of 2020, the FPI board was looking to make a change in the direction of the company, and they asked me to step in and serve as interim CEO until they could hire a new executive to run FPI. Of course, as we all know, 2020 brought a lot of interesting events, one of which was COVID-19. And because of that, I agreed to serve as CEO through most of this year to give the board plenty of time to both assess internal candidates as well as look for external candidates. I'll be closing out my time as acting CEO here October 1st, and I'm pretty proud of the things that we were able to do and accomplish in the direction and the readjustment of the culture and change at FPI during the last 9 months.
We've been really happy to have you. So to begin, can you give listeners an understanding of how and why FPI was established 25 years ago and what your role was in forming FPI?
Yeah, sure, thanks. So 25 years ago, almost 26 years ago, the farm credit system consisted of 12 farm credit district banks. And those district banks not only provided funds and money for the ACAs, at that time they were called PCAs and federal land banks, to lend to farmers and ranchers, but they also provided backroom services for the ACAs, technology support, HR support, legal support. And as a result of some re-examination and a project to look at how farm credit had to adjust and change to serve customers for the 21st century, we looked at forming a service company. Now, at the time, I was an employee of the Farm Credit Bank, and there was a enabling legislation set by Congress that allowed for farm credit entities to form a service company. And quite frankly, nobody had taken advantage of that legislation or that opportunity. I was involved in the project plan to evaluate the future of the farm credit system and how things should be done differently. And one of the ideas that a couple of us had, including me, was to separate services from funding loans. And we really thought that those who use the services, technology, HR, legal, ought to be responsible and accountable for that. So the concept of forming a service company came about. Actually, I was named the first CEO of FPI back 25 years ago, and I was charged with not only forming the company, which took some regulatory approvals and a legal process, but selecting the employees from the Farm Credit Bank that would be the original 32 employees that you mentioned to help serve ACA customers. At that time, the ACAs were all in the Northeast. They were part of the Farm Credit Bank of Springfield, and they were 5 ACAs that had banded together to do things for the common good and form FPI. So they were the original owners of Financial Partners back in 1995. I think the entities, I'll have this right, was Yankee Farm Credit, Farm Credit of Maine, First Pioneer Farm Credit, Central New York Farm Credit, and Farm Credit of Western New York. So we all banded together to form FPI. Shortly after I got the company started and picked the first 30 to 40 employees, I was asked to interview and selected as the CEO of First Pioneer Farm Credit. First Pioneer Farm Credit then went on kind of a merger rant over the next 25 years, and all of the original Northeast entities except Yankee merged to form Farm Credit East. And that was where I was CEO for the last 25 years. And we've been a partner of FPI and owner ever since. After getting FPI started and running for a while, we decided we needed more critical mass to have a more robust service company. And we got a chance to partner with other ACAs across the country. Original partners were a group of ACAs from California that merged to become part of FPI. They became owners. After that, Northwest Farm Credit became an owner and a partner in Ag Country. So all of those things happened subsequent to our original start date in 1995. And I don't recall the exact time frame, but it was the California ACAs first, Northwest second, Ag Country third. And then it kind of brought us to where we are today. And along the way, we picked up Farm Credit of Illinois as an owner and an additional vendor contract with Fresno Farm Credit.
Yes, it was a beautiful beginning, it seems. So what were the founding principles of FPI? I've heard the term once and done many a times before, but what does that mean and why was it so important and why is it still very important?
So when we started FPI, technology at that point in time was done kind of in a mainframe environment. So you basically had dummy terminals in the ACAs connected up to a giant server, a giant mainframe at the Farm Credit Bank. And at that time, server technology was becoming prevalent. And so we thought that we would take advantage of that server technology and move the computing power as close to the customer, the farmer customer, as possible. So our original strategy was to move away from legacy mainframe onto servers and take advantage of the personal computer that was just getting its legs back in 1995. So that was the first important strategy, was to unhook from a legacy mainframe system and move to a server-based technology supported, tied into personal computers, and to try to move the computing power as close to the customer to enhance speed and processing speed as fast as possible. The second founding principle was to develop or purchase technology that enabled the ACA owners to be more efficient and serve the customer better. And so we were very willing to partner with like-minded ACAs that were willing to spend resources and dollars on technology to enable us to be more efficient. At that time in the Farm Credit system, a lot of farm credit entities across the United States looked at technologies as just the cost. And they were focusing on delivering that the cheapest way possible. The difference with the FPI solution is we were looking for solutions that would improve operational efficiency. And so that if our total spend went down, we were able to replace labor, for example, with technology. That was a good thing. And so we were looking to partner with like-minded ACAs that wanted to use technology as an enabler to be successful in the marketplace and provide better service to customers and a more optimized experience for the staff. So along the way, we came up with this concept of once and done that indicated an operational efficiency that we wanted to do. In the past, when you had paper documents or even things that were computerized, a customer, a ACA end user customer, had to sign various documents. So to do a loan closing, it would take anywhere from 5 to 15 documents to be signed. And then along the way, you had to rekey their name and address and customer information into the various loan systems, whether it would be the loan accounting system or whatever customer relationship software that you had at the time. It really wasn't called that then, but you had to key it in every time. So you required a lot of people just sitting at the keyboard re-entering information. And so it became our mantra that you should only have to enter your name, address, social security number, and other vital information about a customer once. And then the system ought to be able to grab that data and populate all the other systems that we needed to populate with that information. So we kind of came up with the mantra once and done, so that you, number one, improve the customer experience. So if you were a borrower, you only had to sign very few documents, and you only had to give your information once. And if you were a employee serving the customer, you only had to enter it once. And that was kind of a standard we tried to live to as we reviewed and developed new technology to enable our staff to be successful.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. I feel like the founding principles are the reason that we are still super successful as a company. And what were some of the early successes for FPI and the associations using this new model, or at the time, the new model?
Yeah, so I won't have these numbers exact because I don't have everything in front of me. But let's just say that the big saving was overall improvement in the cost structure of the ACA, so they could be competitive and be very aggressive in serving customers and provide the value that a farm credit cooperative was designed to do. So if, for example, and I think these numbers are pretty close, that the average cost of delivery all in for an association lending to a farm customer was $2.20 per hundred back in 1993 and 1994, we were able to drop that cost to down under $1.20, which was our goal, by utilizing the technology tools that we developed to become more efficient. Now, the efficiency resulted in a less labor. One of the things the farm credit system did then was just kind of adjust the size of its company, not through downsizing, but through attrition, and improve service levels, and drove efficiency in a big way. And our customers saw an improvement in that because our employees were able to spend more time at the kitchen table discussing their future needs with ACA customers. And we were able to support all of that with less staff and backroom services, both at the ACA and FPI. So that was a huge win. When you talk about that kind of reduction in profitability and expense, it enhanced profits of the ACAs to either reduce interest rates to customers or provide patronage dividends, which most of them are paying now, to give people a rebate on their borrowings, which really makes you bulletproof relative to competition when you're able to lend to customers at a very strong rate, and on top of that provide a dividend return. And a lot of that has to do with the technology that we put in place at FPI to be successful. I think the other thing is that as we looked around, we couldn't find many off-the-shelf tools that allowed us to accomplish our technology objectives. So it was our first real attempt to outsource, which we're getting more comfortable with doing maybe 25 years later. We hired a company called SHL System House to develop our server-based tools that really was a totally integrated solution that we developed ourselves. I'm going to talk about that in a bit more. We called it Basis. And that whole system was developed within a 2-year time frame and rolled out to the ACAs in a very successful way. And I remember very well returning from a technology summit in the farm credit system with the previous CEO, Tom Moran. And we had brought in some consultants to evaluate the direction and strategy we were going, as well as other farm credit entities. And they promptly announced that based on their experience, only 20% of the software initiatives that people embarked on were successful. The rest failed. And so Tom and I made up our minds that we were going to be a part of that 20% that had a successful launch and implementation of a new tool that allowed our ACA customers to be successful and accomplish their goals.
It seems as though that we did have a lot of successes even in the early days with customer optimization, making sure that they had a really great experience. But were there any early failures that FPI learned from?
Well, I mean, certainly like any technology initiative, we learned a lot about project management and project planning and implementing technology. And 9 times out of 10, it always took a little longer than expected. And perhaps we underestimated the cost of delivery. So that, we had those internal failures failures would probably be the wrong word, internal challenges at FPI as we tried to grow the tools and enhance the customer experience. But the other thing we learned quickly is that we needed more scale and we had lots of single dependencies on employees as we were just trying to support the 5 ACAs that were the original founders at FPI. So it brought us around to looking at a kind of a growth strategy to help grow the company so we could build up more scale in our employee base to better serve existing customers and potential customers. So we started talking to, after we had a viable product and a successful launch, to the Western Farm Credit Bank, which primarily is associations that are a part of Farm Credit West. But we started looking at them, and they were looking for a technology solution. They were in the process of merging their bank with another bank, and they wanted to take technology on at the ACA level. And so we added them as owners. There were a lot of learning moments at that initial bringing on new partners, despite our best efforts to align culturally and align with the goals of FPI to use technology to enable end user ACA employees to be successful. Many of the Western Farm Credit entities were just more interested in low cost technology and getting rid of their Farm Credit Bank. So while we thought we had cultural alignment with the leaders of many of the ACAs, we ultimately did not. It also taught us a second lesson, is that you should probably get your money up front when it comes to technology, something we learned to do later on in life at FPI. In order to make it easier for the ACAs that were coming into FPI, we stretched their payment for the technology we developed over time, so that it would be less burdensome to them. Well, some of the ACAs really had a tough time adopting the new technology. It was very complex and complicated, and you had to have a commitment to kind of get your staff using the tools. As many of us know that have been involved in change management, change is hard for employees. They like doing things the way they're comfortable with, the way they know how, and to learn new tools at that point in time was very difficult. It wasn't like downloading an app from the App Store that we have today. It was a very complex system that took a lot of training. And so in our early years of growing the company and adding customers, we learned a lot about onboarding customers, the things that we had to have in place, the cultural alignment we needed with the ACAs, because we had some customers exit, and it was a bit of a distraction as we worked through those challenges to get those folks out of FPI and align the customer interest or the ACA interest with where FPI was going. So in addition to learning how to manage technology and project skills, we learned how to onboard customers better. We learned how to look for partners that had the same goals. And despite the fact that many say, yeah, we align with your goals, you need to probe a bit and spend a little more time. So we learned a lot more about that. So consequently, when we had a chance to continue expanding by adding Northwest, I spent a year working with their CEO to make sure he understood what they were getting into before they joined. And we did the same thing with Ag Country. The only challenge at Ag Country is there was some CEO turnover due to some health issues. So it was a little bumpier than we would have liked. But I think the lessons we learned was to make sure that your partners are aligned, they have the same goals and interests, so that you don't end up setting up 5 or 6 different systems within FPI. That takes away the efficiency you get by partnering together to come up with solutions that meet ACA needs.
Yeah, it's certainly important to find people with the same values. And as you mentioned, change is certainly difficult, but with a growth mindset, I think most companies will find great changes. With that being said, you can't just have a fixed mindset and never keep pushing forward for the better of your company, which leads me to Empower and Basis. You briefly mentioned them before, and I understand that before Empower, FPI developed a customer management and loan origination system called Basis. So what did that offer the associations, and how did it evolve into Empower?
Let me talk about Basis a little bit. One of the advantages Basis had, it was a totally integrated CRM system that tied to underwriting, tied to loan processing. But the real advantage it had was it was all within the same network. So there were no outside influences, so you didn't have all the security protocols that we have today. Everything was through our own dedicated servers. It would be called kind of a VPN, but it was really dedicated lines, dedicated servers, dedicated PCs. And the only thing that was coming in and out of that system was email. And you were able to monitor email pretty easily. So you didn't have a lot of outside influences that are requiring all the kind of security protocols that we have today. And so the tools were excellent. They provide a lot of efficiency. But as the world started to change and there were more applications out there for purchase off the shelf, and the web was taking off, and we decided that we needed to, after about a 10-year run, we had to modernize Basis to a more current software language and to what I call webify the tool, so that loan officers and office assistants and ACA staff could start using tools anywhere, anytime, any place. So the transition from Basis to Empower took place. Empower also then was going to make many enhancements that some of the ACA partners that came in later to the party wanted adjustments based on the way they did business. And so Empower provided more flexibility to have some different approaches per ACA. So you were able to modify the tools to be a little more ACA specific as we webified the tools, and we called that Empower. We also were moving to a different storage approach for data. We all knew that data would be very important in the future to used in the decisioning of credit and the decisioning of operations. And so we needed a more robust data structure that Empower allowed us to do. And so the whole transition was really to take the tools that we developed early on in Basis, webify them, make them a little more efficient, a little more ACA specific, and then Empower was developed. Now with that, then we had to open up our systems to the World Wide Web, and that brought on both convenience for the ACAs and utility for the ACA employees, but also exposed us to more risk from a cybersecurity perspective. So FPI had to embark on developing more security protocols as we webified the tools.
So this was a pretty massive change for FPI. What would you say has been the biggest change in the industry in the past 25 years, and how has it impacted how FPI and the associations have adjusted their business? Would you consider this the biggest change, or would you consider something else?
I think the biggest, first of all, the biggest challenge is once you embark on implementing a new set of technology tools, on the heels of it, there's always a better tool, but you can't keep changing. So you have to kind of evolve in a strategic way. So, one of the challenges for the FPI company is to deliver the product in a very speedy and efficient way, but also keep it robust enough to evolve and change based on the way technology is emerging. I think there's always trade-offs as you evolve and take on new technology. And we're going we talk a little bit about the technology that we're doing now. As you move towards off-the-shelf tools, you trade off flexibility, because the off-the-shelf tools are designed for a large amount of people and masses. They're not very specific. Whereas if you develop software on your own, you can structure the software to mimic the business practices that you have in your entity. So the biggest challenge that we had as we grew and used Empower was to take some of the tools that are standard in the industry and get them specific to meet the business requirements of the ACA. The other big challenge I already mentioned is as you open up your systems to outsiders, which not only improves the experience for customers, but for ACA employees, you expose to risk. There's been a whole cottage industry built around protecting information, protecting systems from people who want to do harm. And that's been the biggest challenge, is that, you trade off flexibility and design and user experience with the fact that the more flexible you make the systems, the more open you make the systems, the more probable it is that some cybersecurity hacker can come in and just be disruptive and cause problems. And that's brought on a whole host of expense as we've built up security teams, as we've built up security systems to protect information that the customers have. Along the way, the government got involved and placed an awful lot of responsibility on financial institutions to protect private information. So that too has been a challenge, in that all the responsibility for that falls on the financial institution, not necessarily the end user. So all of those things, while we've added flexibility, the ability to work anywhere, anytime, the trade-off is the security and the structure you have to put in place to protect information.
Certainly understandable. So switching gears just a little bit, now more thinking about the bigger picture of FPI, what do you believe is our ACA partners' vision for FPI over the next 25 years?
I think that's a great question, and I think it will evolve. I think one of the misnomers that sometimes the FPI staff and some others have is that the ACAs want to just keep growing the company and add new customers. And that isn't the case. One of the things we've learned as owners of FPI is that you need to be partners with people that think very similar and want to use technology in the same way. And so I think the current owners you think of FPI as a natural extension of their own team, as their technology group, as opposed to having a whole technology team that they have internally. They are not big enough to do it on their own, so they partner with other entities, and they view FPI as kind of their technology company serving their needs. And their role is to continue developing leading edge products that enable them to be successful, and that if they're successful, the growth in the company will come through their ability to add more end user customers, farmers, ranchers, fishermen. That internal growth alone will allow us to continue to spend on new technologies and new tools and move forward. The current owners are not opposed to spending money for success. They've demonstrated that year after year, but what they want is value for that spend. They want to make sure that FPI is optimized as they go forward, and they want to make sure that the tools they implement are adding value and optimizing things for their ACA staff.
That is a great answer. And like you said, it was a great question. It's very interesting to think about other people's perspectives over FPI as a whole. So as you reflect on the past and look to the future, what advice would you give FPI leadership and staff on how to maintain a partner-centric focus?
Yeah, so I think that was probably the major change that brought about my role as interim CEO, is that FPI lost its way as it relates to being a customer-first, customer-centric culture. And a couple of challenges along the way is that the FPI staff do not live and work in the ACAs on a regular basis. And so they need to understand the business better, the challenges that the ACA customers have with delivery, so they can be more partner focused. And I think sometimes, I talk about with my grandkids, turn your ears on. We have to do a better job of listening, proposing solutions, listening again, and then go ahead and implement. And then once we have a good understanding of what the ACA customers really want through better listening, better questioning techniques, better alignment, then we got to execute in a rapid manner. I think gone are the times that we can say, look, it's going to take 12 months or 2 years to implement a tool. Speed to market is really important today, particularly with the way technology's been developed. So I think FPI on a go-forward basis needs to make their projects much smaller, not as big as they've been in the past, much quicker to market, and along the way, have a more immediate feedback loop so that we know whether we met the mark at FPI in developing the tool, and whether the ACA customers are able to use that based on their business requirements. So I think the biggest challenge, it's been the biggest challenge in running any company from an internal perspective. And I think it gets even more strained as you have a separate technology company that isn't embedded in the ACAs, is to improve the customer feedback loop so that FPI employees know what the customers want. One of the things I did early on in my interim CEO role at FPI was meet with every employee on a one-on-one session. And all of them really want to do a great job, and they buy into the mission and the purpose of FPI, the values that our ACA customers have in serving agriculture and feeding the world. And they want to hit the mark. And the biggest complaint was they don't really understand sometimes what the customers want. So I think on a go-forward basis, and I know the current team is working very hard to do this, is we need to improve the customer communications, the feedback loop, the give and take. FPI has to become a trusted advisor for when they say, no, that's not a good solution to buy off the shelf because it conflicts with our technology architecture and will not be a long-term solution. The ACAs have to learn to take that advice and have confidence in it, just like we have to learn to say, that tool misses the mark, we better adjust it and do things. I think the second thing is that we have to optimize ourselves at FPI. I think there's a lot of things that are being done because they've been done from a historical perspective. But we need to really evaluate how we can improve the efficiency, not so much so we can cut staff, but so we can free up staff to deliver more products and solutions. When I visited with the board of FPI in August at our planning session, there's lots of tools that they want to adopt that they've heard about, but FPI isn't positioned to work on bringing those to market for the ACAs because we're pretty busy doing other things. And so we've got to learn how to multitask better, to bring projects in quicker, to tighten up our delivery and approach so that we can get ahead of the ACAs. Really, right now we're following, and it would be nice if FPI were leading and creating opportunities for ACAs to try products they haven't heard about.
Yeah, this is very true. I know being a communication student, it is very important to have the refresher, have the reminder that communication is transactional. It's not just one person says something and the other person listens. It's a constant flow of communication between two parties or more than two parties as well. So hopefully everybody who is listening in the future to this is writing down their notes from Bill Lipinski for some leadership lessons.
The other thing we've learned is that a lot of times people that are very engineering focused, very technology focused, are attracted to that craft because their highest skill set is not communications. And so we got to work harder. It's not intentional. It's just the way people are developed, the way they are. So we've got to work harder at improving that feedback loop between technical, talented resources and folks dealing with customers. So that's where I think a good communications team can be helpful. We need more translators, whether it's like translating a foreign language to English. Well, a lot of times for people that are using technology, they don't want to know how it works. They just want to know how to make it work. And we've got to do a better job of translating that so people can understand each other.
Yep, you got to have both. You have to have the technology focus, but you also have to be able to convey it in a way that everybody understands. So finally, this is our last question, so it's pretty big. What is your vision for FPI's next 25 years?
I think that's a great question. My personal, one of the reasons I stepped in as interim CEO is because I thought the company was splintering apart and some of the ACA partners were not happy and were thinking about going off on their own. And I think that would be a shame. I think the original model of like-minded ACAs partnering together to come up with better solutions in a very cost-effective way still has a place in firm credit. And so my hope over the next 25 years is that FPI will really get it right in terms of, I think in its first 15 years, It was really good at understanding what the customers need and developing technology. In the next 10 years, it got a little sloppy on project management and execution. The next 3 or 4 years, it tried to get better at execution and project management, but lost customer focus. So I'm hopeful that as this management team goes forward, that they will combine good customer focus, good listening skills, good feedback loops between the ACA customers and FPI with excellent execution skills, project management skills, and delivery skills. And I think if they get that right in the next couple of years, they will be very successful. The current partners will consume more products and look for FPI to do more work for them. Along the way, they may acquire or merge into other ACAs, so internal growth will happen. Maybe along the way, you might pick up a new customer. That's going to be up to the board and the strategy. But my hope is that you look up in the next 25 years and FPI has been able to get it right, balancing good customer service, good customer listening skills with excellent execution, and really add the value of partnering that FPI had hoped to do. You know, it's not a good deal if you partner and individually your costs are higher than they would be if you went on your own. So FPI, I hope, over the next 25 years will leverage the power of partnering that we envisioned at FPI to be very efficient and really excellent at delivering products that ACA customers can consume.
All right, that was a very well said answer. We thank you very much for taking the time to celebrate FPI's 25th anniversary and sharing your stories with us. We really do appreciate it, Bill. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.